Okie dokie, we're recording. So, good evening, good afternoon, good night, good morning, depending on where you're at, everyone. We are at week 5, which is hard to believe. I feel like it has, to me, it's gone very fast. I am very glad that we decided, or somebody convinced me that doing every other week, spreading this over every other week, so over 12 weeks, was a good idea because thank God it really is. It has been a good idea. Um, so yeah, I'm really excited that we're at week 5. And so hopefully people have been making good headway. I see people posting in Slack, both questions and resources. And yeah, please keep using that. I think even after our program, I want people to keep using that. Um, because hopefully we'll have future programs. Some people are like Meredith in their GDG groups will be doing programs. So GDG to me is all about sharing. It's one of the advantages I think that's come out of the Zoom age, right? As much as it's nice to like be in a physical room with people, I feel like having the ability to do this makes it that much more accessible, makes things like this that much more accessible, and also that much more shareable between groups. So, yeah, thank you for 2 weeks. It makes a lot of sense, and I think also from people who are professionals, especially people who are working or have families, have other obligations. I think spreading out over 2 weeks makes it still work, and I'll comment on that a little bit, but it spreads like the amount of work out so that I feel like it helps. Make it manageable for people who are doing multiple things in their life, but also keeps it within a time frame that the knowledge kind of stays in your brain, that in a reasonable amount of time, so that it's, I think, efficient for actually studying and taking the exam. I think at a certain point, and one of the reasons why I led this program was more to encourage myself to kind of stay on track and learn from other people and learn by helping other people learn. And do it within like a set time frame so that I would like get it done. Because if you just keep stretching it out, I feel like it's not as conducive to actually keeping all that information and taking the exam. So it's kind of that fine balance between the time that we have in our lives and retaining the information. So yeah, here we are at week 5. Today we'll kind of discuss a little bit about more about Dataflow, some of the foundations of Dataflow, a little bit of so it was mostly Dataflow, batch, talked a little bit about batch, but it's mostly streaming pipelines and ingestion, a little bit about the separation, how that works, the separation of storage and compute, kind of the advantages of Dataflow. And then, we had the lab that kind of implemented that. I started on next week, so I might be getting ahead of myself, but I know some of the lab work I did, like, made you do one that was actually in Java and one that was in Python, because Dataflow you can write in both. I'm definitely much more competent in Python. That's what I use. I write in Python all the time. JavaScript I use kind of on an as needed basis. So it was good to kind of force me to do that. Cool. So announcements. I just wanted to say, because I did some poking after Pradeep put his questions about extensions and helping people along, and it made me kind of check on folks. And as far as I can tell, Pradeep, Richard, and Ferenc are the 3 people who have actually completed all the badges, as well as the requirement to attend at least half of the sessions. So they would have attended at least 3 of the sessions. Some have attended all of them. Others are quite close, and myself included, although I'm not included in getting the vouchers. So y'all will definitely get vouchers, the 3 of you. And then if anybody, I'm going to keep up with this and maybe post in Slack, unless people think they don't want that to be public or whatever. I feel like we're all here, and most of the people I see coming who are kind of close are people who are regularly part of this group. If you think something's not being tracked correctly or you disagree with what I'm finding, please message me. Technology has its faults. I have its faults. So I just want to make sure that I capture everybody. But I think it's probably pretty close to accurate. The other announcement, well, actually go back to that real quick. Kind of extending on the comments that Pretty put in our Slack chat. If you're not in the Slack chat, the gist of it is that, hey, there's only, I would say there's like 6 to 8 people who are actively doing stuff like regularly. And worrying like, hey, if there's that few people, it kind of, based on conversations with people who've run this program before, that sort of tracks in terms of the percentage of people who kind of follow through. If there are people who are like really committed and they're worried about, timelines and all this stuff, please reach out to me. I want to help, but know that, I am a bit firm and strict in some sense, in that like this was laid out from the beginning, and we did stretch it out over 12 weeks, which I think is reasonable. We understand everybody here works or is working or taking multiple exams. I feel like every day I see Barney has passed another exam on LinkedIn. So I think there's definitely a balance. Like I get people's time commitments, but I also like there does have to be a bit of like self-motivation, right? I can't force anybody here to do the work, right? It's not my job. I've even taught, when I was in graduate school and teaching classes, at the end of the day, you can have a syllabus and requirements. You can't force people across the line, right? So we're here to learn together. And I feel like even if you're just here to learn and you're not even planning to take the exam, that's great. But so if somebody is just like, no, I really, really want to get through this and I just need some other motivation, like, or a kick in the butt or something, let me know. We'll get there. I also, Meredith, thank you. If you can share like those study groups, like the Friday night group or whatever else, anything that's sort of public that you want people to have, any additional study groups, I would love to hang out. But again, like I know myself, and there's only, for me, like I'll try to get there if I can, but a lot of my outside studying from this, I do solo just because of my timing and how my brain works, like how I study. But everybody's different. So we want to make sure you guys have, or y'all have the resources should you want them. So make sure we share all that. Requirements, right? So I did say, at this point, if you complete what we stated up front of this program of the requirements by the end of the month, May 30th, meaning you complete all the badges as part of the program, and you have attended or will attend 3 of the 6 sessions, then we will see about making sure you're included in the group that can earn the voucher. I feel like that's fair. I don't feel like it's useful to extend it much further than that, because like I said, I just think there's a limited amount of time where you're going to keep on the information that will be useful for the exam. Now, once you get the voucher, it's up to you to schedule the exam. You can continue studying and take it whenever is convenient to you. That can be right away. That can be months from now. That's up to you. But I think for the purposes of this program and distributing our limited number of vouchers, giving up to May 30th, kind of like first come, first serve / up to May 30th, kind of whichever comes first, right? If there's more than 10 people before that point, then that's just what Google has given me at this point. So you can still take the exam. I just won't have a free voucher for you. But I really feel like we're going to be good. Frank, I think I can probably email you the voucher like after this. At this point, I have the vouchers, so I do physically have them, or I have an email with them. so I can get them to you. Which, yeah, you've earned that, so you can have that. So yeah. And also, to be clear, and I've stated this before, I am not including myself in the 10 vouchers. I have another way to get the voucher. I'm good. I'm set. So based on our numbers, we should be able to accommodate folks. But yeah, I just wanted to make that really clear, like just trying to be accommodating, trying to be fair as well, and trying to be kind of realistic. If anybody needs something else or has other questions about that or suggestions, please let me know. But I hope that kind of works for everybody. So then the other thing I want to say is that my company, this is, outside of Google, but my company is also hiring actively. In fact, my team is hiring. So please check out the link here, and these slides I'll share later. If there's something that interests you that you think fits, you can message me. We can chat more offline. I'm not the hiring manager, but I can give you insights, that sort of stuff. Yeah, yeah. So please let me know. I really enjoy it. I really love my job. So that's that. I will say that pretty much all of the jobs, they're hiring people who are in the regions of Atlanta and New York / Brooklyn, because they are doing hybrid at this point. And they're trying to get our engineering teams sort of regionally aligned so that teams are generally close in location. It's the new world order. It's kind of, we're testing the water. So just asterisks on that. But I feel like there's honestly flexibility in a lot of things. So don't let it be a deterrent. Cool. So again, if you have questions about that, you can message me kind of offline. All right. So today we're going through some batch and mostly streaming with Dataflow. And this slide, kind of how I understood it in terms of the study guide, is that they really want, the aim of the exam and sort of the theming is that all these solutions are really meant to ensure your solution quality, right? And that the idea of like these serverless tools, these serverless solutions, are meant to balance and get your products into states that are like highly secure and compliant. They help ensure scalability, efficiency, reliability, fidelity, flexibility, and portability. And so thinking about these things, like when we read our questions or exam questions, or even just beyond the exam, like in practice, when you're actually using these things, is thinking about how you can frame problems and design your systems within Google, or honestly, even if you're using another cloud service, thinking about how these serverless solutions you can design them and connect them in a ways that kind of ensure all of these things. So that's kind of the general focus that the exam guide kind of wants people to go into the exam thinking about. So, right. Okay. So basically, Dataflow, we're looking at serverless pipelines. So a serverless batch pipeline is basically, and this is a bit of a review, we've kind of talked about this in different ways over the weeks, but its data is coming from some source, typically in this case within GCP. It could be coming from an outside source as well. And it's going through transforms within Dataflow and then into a sink, such as BigQuery or Cloud Bigtable, kind of depending on the needs for your throughput and latency, kind of the type of data, right? In previous weeks, we've talked about kind of the differences between BigQuery being kind of an analytic column-based warehouse, data lake, and data warehouse, and then cloud big table kind of being event like row driven, right? So with very like low latencies and things like that, high throughput. So let me make sure I continue all those things. Okay. But today we're really focusing on kind of the streaming end of this. And so for streaming, the main difference is that we're using an ingest bus, like a messaging service such as PubSub, to control how we receive or collect the data into the processing and data sync pipelines. And so this module really is about kind of how that architecture works and the different aggregations and transformations, how they work within Dataflow. And then, again, using BigQuery or Bigtable, depending on what kind of aggregates or individual records that you're trying to write. So Dataflow is essentially just Apache Beam. So Apache Beam is batch and plus stream, so Beam. So it's really just like a wrapper kind of running Apache Beam. And Beam provides abstractions that can unify batch and streaming data processing using P collections, P transforms, the overall pipeline, and pipeline runners. We end up, you saw this in the lab. If you've done the lab, you can choose a pipeline runner, such as a direct runner that you can run locally, which is usually used for testing, or running using Dataflow as the runner off the, which again, we saw kind of that has much bigger scalability. And that's sort of what we saw. The way we saw the lab built out was actually running kind of on the direct runner initially, and then testing some things, and then I think step by step kind of adding the different transforms, and then running it in the Dataflow runner. A couple of really important things to know about kind of these different pieces of Dataflow and Beam is that a P collection is an immutable data abstraction, meaning that the serialized data within serialized data, like a byte string that is contained within that collection, cannot and does not change throughout this process. Any changes within the pipeline will ingest one P collection and actually create a whole new one with those transforms applied, right? And so those actions of the pipeline are what are handled by the P transforms. So they handle the input, transformation, and output of the data. And then each action is passed along through a kind of a graph. So if you went into the Dataflow UI, you would have seen kind of like the graph, a directed graph of kind of the transforms being abstracted and passing the transforms one to the other to the other. Right. So a P collection can represent both streaming and batch data. There's no size limit to the P collection. The main difference is that batch data is a bounded collection. Doesn't mean that there's a size limit. It just means it has like an actual bound of like what that data actually is at that snapshot in time, right? Whereas streaming data is an unbounded collection. So each element inside the P collection can be individually processed and accessed and processed. So the transforms actually can operate or do operate in a distributed way, which and the cool thing about Dataflow is it kind of figures that out, right? And it builds in efficiencies and kind of adjusts based on kind of the data and the flow of data. So the fact that the data within each P collection can be individually accessed, that's how the implementation of the distributed processing within Dataflow is, that's how it works. That's how it actually, they're actually able to do it. So all the other interesting thing is that P collections can store all types of data, and they store it in a serialized like byte string. And So there's no need to serialize, reserialize, deserialize like the data prior to like transferring between like when you receive it and process it and then put it in the sink. Basically, the data kind of moves through the system completely in this serialized state because it's a very efficient, and is only deserialized when you need to apply the transform. So it's much more efficient way to do distributed processing. And I'm trying to think. So kind of other like interesting tidbits. Some of this is like really kind of my understanding of it is it's been improved and made possible because of the availability of the computing resources we have now. So distributed computing in the past, when sort of like on-prem servers were limited, a lot of that you didn't have like these immutable data sets. Like you would actually be doing the processing in place to save memory, basically. But then kind of ownership and distribution of that data would be complicated. Whereas in this case, you're effectively just copying the data and applying on like new copies of that data. So because you have less of the memory constraints, so then you can be very efficient in the distribution of the tasks and how it kind of moves through. So I think I kind of just said some of this, but to kind of differentiate, and I don't know if I've noticed a specific question of like this in the exam, but just in case, because Dataflow is effectively running Apache Beam, but there is kind of a differentiation between like what each thing is doing. Dataflow itself is not equal to Apache Beam. It's running kind of the abstraction of Apache Beam. So the Beam pipeline is specifying kind of what needs to be done within the pipeline, whereas the service, Dataflow, is choosing how to do that. So that's kind of the fun sort of like meat and potatoes with it, is that, you're designating like through the code the transforms, but then Dataflow itself is figuring out how to do the parallel processing and distribute the tasks to be like the most efficient, right? So it's determining sort of that stuff, which is really cool. So it's like continuously optimizing. And so the workloads, it's like balancing workloads across the cluster and things like that. So pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool. I'm trying to think. Are there any questions? I know I'm kind of like going. So I think I'm trying to think if I had any other notes on this slide. We've got graph. Yeah, so the graph, the scheduling. We'll talk a little bit about how like watermarking and why we watermark. We've talked about this in the past. We're going to talk about this more today. Cool. So, and then it's all kind of coming out into whatever sync that we've defined. Cool. Making sure. All right. So here's one of the challenges, right? So there's a challenge around like aggregations if our transforms are aggregations. So filtering is pretty straightforward, right? Filter out. We don't want this type of data. We do want this type of data. That's pretty straightforward. It's not really affected by the time dependencies on the arrival of data, whether it's certainly not batch or streaming, right? But if you're trying to take an average of the data and you're using the streaming scenario, if you plug in the formula, the sum from 1 to n, but in this case, it's streaming, so n is it doesn't stop, right? So where do you stop? How do you actually determine an average in that scenario? So this is when you actually need to use finite windows, right? So in this case, we can define our windows by the date timestamp from PubSub and kind of start making these like finite chunks of data. So that's great. PubSub kind of gives us this information, and we'll be able to use it for aggregations. However, of course, nothing is um, nothing is quite that simple. So there are different types of windows one could choose. Fixed windows are ones that are divided into time slices, so hourly, daily, monthly. They're consist of consistent, non-overlapping intervals. Sliding windows are quite common, and they could be, for example, like 24 hours of data that shift every hour, right? So there's overlapping information going on there. And then sessions are session-based windows that capture bursts um, of user activity. So you might define like a minimum gap duration, and then but each session is like triggered by some other element, like some other message to the system or some other action that's happening, that's coming through PubSub. You would have practiced some of this, I think, in maybe not this week, but there was a couple weeks ago where we did some other data flow. And I think there was some different setting of different time windows. So it's again pretty straightforward. I still to this, I have not seen any code specific questions in the exam. But again, from a practical standpoint, it's just good to know that this exists. And again, any code, I certainly don't remember all code off the top of my head. Just knowing how to search for something and get examples is kind of how, knowing that something exists, then you can search for it and you can find examples like this. So they gave Python, and of course, this is going to be done in Java as well. So, of course, I alluded to this is like that would work in a perfect scenario when there's no latency between the messages. So your defined windows are exactly that, they're defined, right? And the messages are coming as they should, exactly when they're defined. So like, all things being equal, if there's no latency in an ideal world, everything's instantaneous, and the fixed windows basically will flush at the close of every window. So, in this case, like at the very microsecond that like 8:05:00, if you have a 5-minute window, it'll terminate and it's going to flush all the data. So effectively, if there was no latency, all your messages that were within that 5-minute window should have come within that 5-minute window and then will be flushed. However, we know that in the real world, this doesn't happen. Latency happens. So you'll have network delays, system backups, processing delays, PubSub latency, all sorts of things, right? So how do you determine when to actually close the window and flush the data if, things aren't falling within the window they should, if there is some kind of latency or delay, right? So how much longer do we wait? Do we wait like 5 more seconds and then flush the window? Like what's too late? When do we throw the data out if it's like too old? So this is when we use watermarks. And actually Dataflow does have a default of watermarking that it keeps track automatically. So it effectively tracks the lag time between the PubSub connector and like when the message is received and processed, keeps track of that, and then kind of determines, oh, that's the lag time, and then will automatically flush data after that lag time. So it's basically continuously calculate data flow in its default will continuously calculate this actual lag time and compute the watermark for you, which is just saying like it's computing how far we are behind, right? So it will, in its default, wait until the watermark that it's computed has elapsed, and then so it could be like in this example 3-4 seconds, and then it will automatically flush the window, since at that point it's like it believes it has all the data it should have, right? But if data is late, say like there's an event with a timestamp of 8:04, but now it's 8:06, and now it's 2 minutes late. It's maybe 1 minute after the window, the lag time is closed. So what do we do with that data? The default is that goes away. It flushes, but you can set what to do with the late arrivals. So there's a couple different ways to set that. And actually, I think default is, again, it will flush after the determined watermark, after the determined lag. But you can have a couple of different composites and custom triggers only in Java, not in Python. So just be aware of that. So Java, you can override the behavior if for late data, but in Python, it's discarded. There, you can't override that currently. Just so you know. So there's a couple different triggers. Default is after watermark. So basically after the watermark, then data will go, data will be flushed. There's processing time triggers. So once it basically will wait until an element is processed, or you have after processing time. And then you can do kind of like data driven and composite triggers. So let's say you had a data driven trigger where you're going to wait for 15 elements. And so every 15 elements, it will process that, it will emit that data and process it. But let's say at the end, maybe you get to the point and there's 14 elements left, right? So it's just going to sit there. So a composite trigger would say, okay, 15 elements, or no more data is arriving, right? So like it will have that kind of combination. But again, Java only. And here's some examples, and make sure to point out in red that Python cannot do this. Now, I could see this being a question, right? Like, and we talk about process of elimination with these questions. And if there's a question that talks about doing custom watermarking or what to do with late data, blah, 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 and you have a, Python script or something, I'd be like, oh, Python script, that's my keyword, right? Like, no, we can't do that. So like things like that, I can see. I don't think I've seen like a specific one yet in any of the study guide. I have like the official study guide next to me, but I can see that being like something in that realm being a question. So kind of understanding that would be valuable. Or maybe I'm putting too much into this, but I think to me, it indicates I need to brush up on my Java. Because I think calculating these lag times is probably really valuable. Yeah, so note to self, learn more Java among all the things we must learn, right? Cool. And then we also spent a little bit of time in the lab on some ML deployment, I think, and we mostly focused on ML, BigQuery ML. So BigQuery ML is like really cool. There's a lot of stuff you can do in there, although in my mind, and I think in a lot of the documentation I've seen, I don't know if they explicitly say this, but to me, it's more of a good like way to test models and build kind of like baseline models. I personally have not seen or heard of something like this being put into production. That doesn't mean it can't be. There's certainly a use case for lots of things, but it's a really good way to play around, test kind of theories, kind of build some baseline models, and get some, kind of like internal model insights, I think. And then you can like, let me see. Yeah. What's cool is you can actually apply like pre-trained like TensorFlow models and predict like directly within BigQuery on your BigQuery data, which is super valuable, really kind of a quick and efficient way to sort of test these scenarios before you start building like full blown like production um, models, which would most likely be deployed in like Vertex AI or something like that, depending on how much customization you're using for your models. So um, yeah, I thought that was interesting. Like most of our work this last week, I think, was in the streaming pipelines, and then there was like some fun stuff in ML models. So I'm not complaining. I think it was like, oh, this was. It's like sometimes the study guide is like, okay, this is gonna go here. I'm like, all right, fine. Right. So that's kind of a very my best overview of my understanding and some experience with Dataflow, streaming, Windows. It was a lot in a compressed amount of time. I hope it was sort of clear. Are there any, before we kind of go into the sample questions? I think I've done maybe like 6 this week. Are there any general questions? We can also do more questions at the end after we go through our practice questions, our Slidos.
Can you hear me okay, Jessica?
Oh, thanks so much, Rich. Thanks. Yes, Meredith.
Yeah, I was just wondering about BigQuery ML, and say you're just doing analytics,
Mhm.
you aren't putting something into production for a website, or something, you don't need something that's ongoing. Um, could BigQuery ML be sufficient, or would there be a reason to switch over to Vertex AI, um, or some other option?
Yeah. I mean, you're just saying like more of an internal use case, research, not going to be
Yeah.
front facing. To me, I think it's really powerful, particularly if your data is already in BigQuery,
Okay.
right? So if you're keeping your enterprise data in BigQuery, it's all there. You have the option in BigQuery to write, your own models. You can bring in some pre-trained models. Like there's a lot of good, decent flexibility in there. Now, if you want complete production flexibility, you're going to be looking into something like Kubeflow, right? Like, much more customization, even on top of like Vertex, right? So, but I think what you're saying, no, BigQuery ML is great. It's a great
Okay.
starter for sure. You can train models, you can do a certain amount of adjustments to the parameters. Um, but yeah, anything I would say once you start getting into a scenario where you are going to be deploying models, regularly retraining them, having them front facing in any way, even if front facing means it's going into a regularly updated report that's being used like in a dashboard for internal sources. At a certain point, once you start kind of building a product like that, then maybe I would take kind of the models that you've tested within BigQuery and start kind of building them out in a little more robust way, and deploying them kind of using like Vertex AI and Kubeflow and things like that. But if let's say you have a request from business analytics in your organization, business intelligence or sales or marketing, and they want to get some kind of high level idea of what's going on, and you're just kind of doing an ad hoc like report. I feel like BigQuery ML it's great because everything is all in one place, and you can probably answer a lot of questions just by using it that way.
That's
Does
really
that kind of answer your
helpful.
question?
Yeah, yeah. So, just reminder, I work for the Virginia Department of Health, and we're doing a big data migration to BigQuery, and we're like all trying to figure out how to do analytics, and some of us are trying to figure out machine learning in on this platform, but it's mostly just like epidemiological research, and
Yep.
stuff like that. So yeah.
So have I said how I worked at the CDC for 10 years? Yeah.
Yeah, I was really excited to hear that the first day that we had a
I
session.
hear a health department moving to GCP and I'm like, whoa. Like I talked to my former colleagues at CDC and they talk about data, there's like data modernization plan or something. But the thing is with government, this is sort of an aside, but like everything moves so slow because so many processes that by time they like implement everything, it's already like data modernization makes no sense because it's not modern anymore. Like, um, but yeah, that's a completely other situation. Yeah, yeah. I think for y'all, knowing kind of that scenario, keeping it as simple as possible is the best case. And so BigQuery ML or kind of all of the pre-built models. Like Vertex is great because it has kind of the notebook. Um, I think it's actually a workbench inside Vertex AI, so you can play around in there. That acts kind of like a Jupyter notebook. They have pre-built models, so kind of you leveraging sort of the AutoML and pre-built models, either directly in BigQuery ML, you can do kind of hard and fast like testing. And then if you want to kind of go a little bit further, but still have a friendly kind of environment, not so much worried about like, how do I build a machine learning model? The pre-built stuff in Vertex within, and that you can kind of write code in Jupyter notebooks within the Vertex AI workbench, like that's kind of a good option as well, right? And all these things directly connect to your data within GCP. So, yeah,
Thanks.
there
That's really
are there are like labs that some are tied to like the ML pathways in cloud source, cloud, whatever the online thing is. I can confused.
storage.
Yeah. No. What is the word I'm looking for? Google Cloud Skills Boost. Cloud Skills Boost. Right. But there's like a ton of labs and hands-on stuff in there that's not even specifically tied to a pathway. There's just all this extra coursework that's like analytics and machine learning that would very quickly be like how to take BigQuery data, put it in Vertex AI, run a logistic regression, right? Like there are things like that. If you poke around Cloud Skills Boost, that would probably kind of help you further in that as well.
Okay, thanks. And like Rich, I really appreciated the overview tonight. It was um,
Cool.
good to
Yeah,
get reminders and go deep.
tried I tried to do a little bit more because I found like Dataflow to me, like some of these the stuff here is a little more detailed and some of it is can be a little confusing if you're not used to sort of what's happening under the hood. And Dataflow is not a hands-off like part of the product. It's like you have to have like coding skills to use it. And until you can then make templates and then maybe like analysts can then use the templates, but even then there's still a level of like it's not just a UI, like a point and click UI, right? So I think it can be a bit, some of it is a bit p collections and stuff like that can be a bit convoluted, but so I wanted to spend a little bit more time on that. Cool. All right, so let's go through some questions since we are getting a bit late. Here's the Slido. Hopefully these work. I mean, they've worked every time. I don't know why I say that, but yeah. So, first question of the night. Got some triggering and windowing. So you're developing a streaming pipeline with Apache Beam and Dataflow. You want to do windowed aggregations on the incoming data and leverage triggers. Which type of trigger is not supported in Apache Beam? Pradeep, I don't know why. Yeah, I haven't. I don't have to let people in individually, so it hasn't been a trouble. I'm sorry you keep losing connection. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Okay, about half of people responded. I don't, every week I'm like, I don't, want to take up too much time waiting for people. Um, I want people time to get in, but I also don't want to sit around because I know some people just don't feel like doing Slido, so just fine. Mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm. Okay, well, we're gonna go. I'm gonna click, and if you've missed, you'll get in on the next one. Whoa, there seems to be disagreement here. So what type of trigger is not supported in Apache Beam? Not supported. So half of you said element size trigger, which is the correct answer, and half of you said after watermark trigger. So after watermark trigger is a trigger that exists. Processing time trigger and element count. I gave the example, nobody answered this, but I did give the example of like waiting for a certain number of points. Yeah, so the after watermark trigger is effectively the default trigger that after the calculated watermark, the data will flush. Cool. So, yep, element size. So, nope, that is correct. That is not that is not an actual trigger. It is element count is their actual trigger. So, good job for those of you who got that one. Next question. 250,000 devices produce a JSON device status every 10 seconds. You want to capture this event data for any outlier time series analysis. What should you do? This one, again, process of elimination should help, but could be a bit trickier than the last one. So again, wait a couple minutes, see how many people respond. Last time I got 6 responses, so I'll probably wait for approximately that amount. Meredith, are you going to Miami?
No, I am not. I have too many things already on my plate, and I'm kind of a new organizer, so I just found out about it a few weeks ago too. So I think if I would have had it on my radar for longer, I might have prioritized it. Are you gonna go?
I am. I mean, a lot of people are going to both. They're going to Mountain View and then to Miami. I can't go to both. My company was like, because I went to them and I was like, Google's paying, but can I treat it as a conference? And they're like, oh yeah, it's great. But 2 is a lot. And also my husband's traveling, so we kind of are swapping places at home. So it's too much. So, yeah. But
Have
and
you
the
been
one in
before?
Miami is more hands-on, which is better, I think, anyway. So,
Mm-hmm.
all
Have
right.
you been before?
To IO?
Yeah.
or Miami.
Well, to either one.
I've been to Miami. It's okay. I've not been to IO. No.
Okay.
Uh, cool.
I'm just taking recommendations.
Ah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we can get to that. So let's see. Oh, I see people changing their answers. Shift the data into Cloud Bigtable. Good. Use the Cloud Bigtable CBT tool to display device outlier data based on your business requirements. Excellent. So yes, that is the correct answer. Um, so any of these that have BigQuery is not the correct answer because it's not the correct sync for this type of data. Just think about you've got JSON data coming every 10 seconds. It's event capture. So it's not really columnar column type data. Um, it's more row-based event data. So it's going to be, high throughput. So that would be a big table use case. So you can eliminate BigQuery for that. And then, well, yeah, I don't think anybody answered the last one. No, which is good because while this would work, the last one, it's overcomplicated, right? And the CBT tool built in to Cloud Bigtable makes this doing that outlier analysis very easy. So that's the reasoning behind that. Cool. Third question. So we need to stream time series data in Avro format, and then write this to both BigQuery and Cloud Bigtable simultaneously using Dataflow. You want to achieve minimal latency, and this needs to be completed as quickly as possible. What should you do? All right, so we had 7 people respond last time, I think. So maybe I'll wait. Oh, there we go. Okay. See what we got. Create a pipeline that groups data using a P collection. And then uses Bigtable and BigQuery IO transforms. Great job. So the second one, create a pipeline is part of your transform. A part of your transform is it's how it does parallel. It's a parallel processing transform, and it doesn't do that. That does not output to BigQuery. Actually, I don't know that it outputs to Bigtable either. Definitely doesn't output to BigQuery. And then create a pipeline just using P collection, use Avro IO. After the data is written, load the data from cloud storage into BigQuery and Bigtable. Yeah, so some of the keys here are that the transformation really happens between the source and the sink. And so this response is like writing back to the cloud storage and then moving from cloud storage to BigQuery and Bigtable, which doesn't, like, that's like too many steps, right? So it would do the transformation in between, and you have those particular P transforms that can then feed out into both your BigQuery and Bigtable syncs. So that's that. And I don't think anybody, oh, I have put this here. Oops. Cool. Next question. If you want to have a flexible pipeline to all stages of ML, which of the following is a good option? I'm going to give you a hint. I told you this answer during the earlier part of our session today. Six, 7. Cool. I told you the answer and nobody got it. It's Kubeflow. Kubeflow is basically the completely customized flow for all of this. Yeah. So Dataflow, yeah. Dataflow is the transformation part, but it's not ML, right? So it's not for all stages of ML is not, it's your transformation. BigQuery ML is great for testing, some baseline stuff, but it's not flexible really beyond that. Data prep, which I think we've done a little bit. Nobody answered this, but it's a UI for kind of doing data cleaning. Yeah, Kubeflow is you're completely hands-on, write your code, the whole kind of pipeline from scratch implementation, deployment within Google Cloud. So it is the most flexible version. So I gave that answer. I said that. Now you know. You won't forget now. And I think this is the last question of the night. So it is considered a good practice to make your processing logic idempotent. So hopefully we know what idempotence is. Let's answer the question, and then I may ask again that people know about idempotence. So it's important to keep it idempotent when consuming messages from Cloud Pub subtopic. Why is that? Awesome. Let's see. Messages may be received out of order, which is true, but it's not why idempotence is most important. The most important is because messages may actually be delivered multiple times. So you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, that your processing treats the data the same, and the output is the same no matter how many times it's executed, right? So if the data comes in and the processing is triggered again, right, on the same piece of data, it will have the same output. So that's why the messages may be delivered multiple times, is why the processing logic within your pipeline needs to be idempotent. So I kind of just gave the definition of idempotence, but to be clear, the idea is that any function that can be executed several times, it can be executed several times without changing the final result beyond whatever it was in the first iteration. So basically, no matter how many times you do processing on a piece of information, the output should be the same. Stateless functions. Thank you. Stated much better by Frank. Yeah. So, Dataflow, we've talked about, it can treat, right, the order of messages and make sure that things get back in order if there's latency. But the processing itself, like the functions that you use, you need to make sure that no matter what, like if the message is received multiple times, if it's delivered multiple times, doesn't matter, the output will be the same. So those, I believe, are our questions for the night. So again, if there are any additional, oh, I just got an on-call thing. So I was like, that's a new call. Well, fun. So are there any questions about tonight, the future, anything else, any other troubles, anything?
Not here. Just thanks as always.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and if you think of anything comes up, please keep posting in our Slack group. I think that's really helpful. I always think it's really helpful, and we have this practice at my work. We use Slack, is that we really push people back if they DM people on Slack for questions, and we kind of encourage people to post like within our group, in our team channels, or even broader than that, so that it has visibility. More people can chime in, and even if it's me who you were going to DM who answers you, there's certainly other people who may have asked me the same question who now have seen that, right? So I think there's power in kind of posting questions publicly in Slack. It's in the Slack group, and then we have a channel called Road to Google Developers Certification Study Group. I will share again the actual workspace. But then within the, I don't know if can you change channel, share channel. Let's see. Copy link. Here's the actual. I think this is the actual link to the actual. Yeah, that second link should be the link to the actual channel within the workspace. That is our study group. So make sure we've gotten everything. Pretty sure. Oops. Right, so we've got a couple more wonderful serverless data processing to go through. And then again, I know in the beginning, I think it was the preparing for the Google Cloud Professional Data Engineering exam, which we initially in the beginning, but is actually kind of hard from the beginning. Maybe we should all be trying, if you haven't completed it, even if you have, maybe trying it again and seeing, oh, maybe this is easier now. Hopefully it is. I know for myself, like as I go through more of the practice questions online or any of those resources or in the official study guide, thankfully, I feel like I'm doing better. I'm hitting more around like the 80% mark, which makes me feel a little bit better. Still a couple weird things there, but hopefully it's enough to cross the line. So I hope people are experiencing a little bit of that lift. If not, I will try to find more resources to do a better job next time. Cool. So yeah, that's where we're at. 2 weeks from now, we'll have our final session. Yeah, it is a tough week. So, Rich, that's also why I kind of mentioned in Slack that we can have everything completed, the labs by May 30th. We will still, I'll go over this, slides and kind of information the same way we have every other time. We'll go through May 30th. I tentatively, and we can talk about this in Slack, if we want to have like maybe one more impromptu session after that, either it can just be like a happy hour fun time. It can be a final questions. Like if there's more that we have questions about as we really finish those labs, we can do that. We can cross that bridge maybe later. We decide if people really want to do that. But yeah, I think in terms of completing the labs, I'm hoping if I say like May 30th, like that's good. Yeah, if that works for people. So yeah, it is a lot. I've been going through like trying to go through like one part of each lab like a day, and it is a lot. And some of the labs, like I was stuck on one recently. I can't remember what it was. I couldn't get I think it was the one of them where it was like one of the labs was the Dataflow in Java. I did that fine, and then the Dataflow in Python, even though I'm Python, it for some reason something's not running, but I haven't looked at it in a couple of days because yeah, work and life. So if I go at it again and I have a problem, I probably will post about it in Slack. Yeah.
Please, I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Is there any resources for practice the exam questions? Like
Yeah, so you've got this link right here under the first called the Professional Data Engineer Sample Questions. Those are
okay.
yeah, so there is a link to that. There's like it's almost like set up like a Google form.
Okay.
So you can go through. Then and all this stuff I think is linked. I think I also added a lot of things within the kind of study guide that I kind of just created here's the link to that, which kind of puts all of the resources for each week in at least one place. And so there's links to that. I've also, when you go to Cloud Skills Boost, there are links on the pathway. There should be links to some of this information. And then within the GDG event pages, like for this event, I think I have some of these links in there. I got recently, I actually invested in the official study guide, right? I got it from Amazon, and it's quite good. And there's a ton of questions in here. Every chapter has questions, and then there's like a practice exam in the front, and then each chapter has practice questions. And then it comes with like a login information for some site that has more practice questions and things you can do extra too. So this has actually been a pretty good resource for getting more practice questions. Yeah, and Pradeep has posted some Udemy courses that have questions. Just make sure that any of those courses are relatively up to date, because it does the coursework and the exams do get refreshed with the latest information, tooling in GCP. So yeah, that's all there, and it's all linked. We just sent some links, and then if you get in that Slack workspace, people have shared links there too. So hope that answers your question. there are lots of resources. Cool. Yeah. So I realize not everybody, my goal is to be done with it by next time, just because, again, keeping myself on a schedule, being prepared for y'all, so that when I come, I ideally know partially at least what I'm talking about. But yeah, it's gonna be tough. I'm traveling this weekend. So I won't get any of it done this weekend, I know for sure. So cool. Is there anything else? I will reach out to Rich and Frank and Pradeep, who have already earned their vouchers. And that's all I have on my end. So if that's all, let our people across the seas who have stayed up late / early for this go back to bed or take a nap, and the rest of us will go to bed. Yeah. So yeah, it was great seeing you all. Thanks for being here. Keep posting in Slack if you have any other resources or ideas of how this could be better in the future. Again, keeping in mind that I'm only one person, and this is the first time I've done this. So cool. Thanks, y'all, and I hope everyone has a great day or evening wherever they are. Good night.